So in the case of the page opposite, I had a very chaotic line, right? It was very sort of confusing as to where the shapes were and very arbitrary. I could put the shapes wherever I wanted. And in this case, I have these very organized lines that suggest the shapes for me. So the sort of obvious choice is to go in and just go within your lines and stick to the program and really fill in each block in a certain color, right? But it would be interesting, I think, to work in a slightly less obvious way and overlap a couple of painted ellipses that do not follow the exact same shape as what is suggested here. So what that looks like is me painting in a sort of arbitrary ellipsis that is related to the shapes on the page, but doesn't necessarily follow the line. I really wanted to demonstrate how this relationship between your painting and your sketching can be really, really rich and rewarding and very visually interesting. So this is another approach that you can take with your sketching and your drawing and your sort of pre-designed ideas about how things are going to look. You can really make some interestingly drastic changes to the plan. And I think that this kind of painting can really enhance your drawing. There's something really, really satisfying to me and sophisticated to me about painting that doesn't necessarily relate to sketching in a very obvious way. So I wanted to show that going outside the lines is really powerful visually. This becomes so much more dynamic and so much more interesting to me. And in fact, you know what, I'm going to go off the page. There's all kinds of ways to use your space. Oops. Edges are really powerful and really important, and the more you experiment with different ways that you can control the edge of your image or decide if you're going to imply that something goes outside of the parameters of the page, it's just a really interesting thing to explore and really powerful to experiment with. And to sort of make these relate a little more, I'm going to introduce some green. Oops, it's really strong. Just bring this down a bit. Maybe this comes down through here like this. We really like odd numbers. We also really like to see different sizes of things. So maybe just the little implication of something down here is kind of exciting. And just the very idea of a little something over here. Different scale. In fact, it's nice, but I want to make this touch this. So I want to talk for a second about what to do when you make a mistake. And you may not see this page as having a mistake in it, but I do for my intents and purposes. So I'm going to highlight what I don't like about this right now. Is this, I don't love the relationship to everything here. So There's a couple of ways that you can deal with that sort of area of discomfort. And traditionally in art journaling, what a lot of people encourage everyone to do, and what I definitely tend to do, my first impulse is a sort of defensive impulse in a way. And what it is it's to reach for the white gesso and cover over what I don't like, and then build some opaque layers over everything so that you never knew that there was a compositional piece of this that didn't really fit or didn't really work, and just sort of struggle with the elements on the page until I've put them the way I want them to be, until I'm satisfied with what I've got. And that's fine, but I think there are a couple of downsides to doing it that way. And there are a couple of downsides to doing it that way all of the time. So I want to talk about an alternate approach to areas where we feel we've made a mistake. Using white gesso and just continuing to kind of cover up my mistakes and not acknowledge them as valuable to me, as a way for me to look back in a month and learn something about composition from this page. In a way, covering this up with gesso is almost like, let's say I'm practicing layups in basketball, and I'm definitely not athletic, so if I can handle this metaphor, I think most people can. So let's say I'm working on layups, right? If I just gesso over this and then press on and cover the part I don't like and kind of wrangle the page into submission until it's kind of okay visually, that's the equivalent to me of making a bad shot and being in a bad relationship to making a good shot relative to the basket, right? I've advanced up to the basket, I've made my shot, it doesn't work, and it's because of my position relative to the basket. So if I gesso over, it's almost like I'm just still standing under that basket and just throwing the ball and throwing the ball and throwing the ball until maybe I get it in there, maybe I just get sick of doing it and move on. Whereas if I let this mistake exist and I let the problems with this composition just exist, and I say, you know what, next page, I'll get it right. I will try this again, whether it's on a subsequent page or whether it's folding this idea into a canvas painting that I might make. However I take this lesson forward, I'm going to get another shot at this. So if I just leave this and continue the page on its own terms and allow this composition to possibly be okay, but the kind of composition where it would be more successful if I made X, Y, or Z adjustment, if I decide and commit to making those adjustments in subsequent work, to me, that's the equivalent of turning my back, dribbling to the center court, taking a deep breath, and trying again from the start. So you see the value in that. I'm able to look at this after the fact and see what maybe wasn't perfectly successful, and I can make that adjustment the next time I try this particular drawing or painting. So there's a huge value in revisiting this, both in the value itself of revisiting it and having that much more likelihood of making this composition stronger because I know what I know. When I painted this less successful piece in here, and I chose this scale and I chose this relationship to the edge of the page, both of which I think could be stronger. When I painted this, I hadn't painted any of this other information, so I was kind of operating in the dark. I had nothing to respond to. All of these painting areas, all of these marks have the benefit of hindsight. So think how much stronger the composition on a page like this can be if the whole thing has the benefit of hindsight. This is the value of doing things over and over and over again. And the value of doing them over again is that I then have many different versions to pull different ideas from, to choose from, to use as my start points when I want to enhance this idea and carry it forward and develop it fully. So this is a really, really important piece of development as far as I'm concerned. And yes, it is totally fine to gesso over and layer over a piece, but I think it is really helpful to move away from that as your only response to your mistakes, whatever you define as a mistake. And I think it's really helpful to move forward and away from that as your automatic response to seeing something that you're not totally satisfied with showing up on your page when you're journaling or sketchbooking. Okay? So the reason I discourage gesso use with a watercolor journal like this is not because I'm a big meanie and I hate gesso and I don't think it's a good approach. I think it's a great approach. I think it's really healthy to not always have parts of your page that you are not satisfied with staring you in the face. It's fine to do that, but it's also really useful to resist the impulse and to adopt this idea that the page you're making now is just one little piece of your art practice, that you are allowed to try the same idea over and over again as many times as you like, and as long as that idea is satisfying to you on some level. That feeling of discomfort around a mistake is really part of your inner voice telling you that this idea is compelling enough to you, it's important enough to you, that you want to see it through, that you want to see it flourish. So hold on to the positive aspect of that little feeling of discomfort. It's good to push through it, lean into it, and make friends with it, because that feeling of something slightly off, this can be your best friend. This can be the driver of a lot of dedication and the driver of a lot of productivity within an art practice. So that said, little detour had, let's move on and go back to our first page.